Hi, this is Derek.
And this is Carrie from the Better Conversations podcast.
When we aren't talking about money and marriage, we're listening to Stephanie O'Brien on the Moved by Purpose podcast.
I always say the best advice and the worst advice I ever got came from my grandpa. When I was in college, he once told me, he said, choose carefully who you drink with because you can't choose who you work with. Whatever you're doing, the first step is really to define who is your ideal customer. Who can you thrill? Who thrills you to work with? Because once you start to define that person, it makes the decisions easier in your strategy.
Are you longing to know what your purpose is? Are you on the wrong career path? Do you feel like there must be more to life? Don't worry, there's hope. It's time to be moved by purpose. Now your host, Stephanie O'Brien.
Hey, you're listening to the Moved by Purpose podcast with Stephanie O'Brien. I'm excited to have you here. I am blown away that December is here, and that's pretty crazy to me. The year is ending, and it flew by. It went by so fast, and I'm hustling to finish off the year really strong and bring in the new year even stronger. And I'm sure you guys are all doing that as well, finalizing the finishing touches of your goals and being strategic about your goals for next year. And we talked about that back in August and September, about how that time of year, August, September, is the time of year where you revisit your goals and strategize how to meet them by the end of the year, and then what you want your next year to look like. Not December or the new year, but back in August and September. So I've been working diligently on strategizing and planning that, and I'm really excited for what the next year brings. My guest today is Tom Schwab, and he is a wonderful guy, really, really strategic, really, really talented. He actually works for Aaron Walker, and I had him as a guest earlier this year as well, and they are both wonderful guys. Tom Schwab knows how to build an online business with an inbound strategy. He led the growth of Goodbye Crutches, a direct-to-patient private pay e-commerce business, from a regional player to a national leader in under 3 years. He is the leader of the e-commerce HubSpot user group. He is published in the leading industry blogs, featured guest on TV, radio, webinars, and podcasts, and HubSpot featured e-commerce case study. And without further delay, I am welcoming him to the show. Welcome to the show, Tom. It is such an honor to have you on today.
Stephanie, I am thrilled to be here, and two Michiganders connecting over Skype.
I know. You're from the west side, Kalamazoo, which is where I went to school. It's so beautiful over there.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you, and I've listened to so many of your interviews and really love how you drill down on things. So I think we're going to have some great information here that everybody can use.
Yes, I'm really excited. We were talking behind the official recording just a little bit about what you do, so I'm really looking forward to diving in. And so you are familiar then with the first question I ask, which is always, give us a background about what led you to doing what you do today.
Well, I always say mine only makes sense in the rearview mirror. My first job out of college was running nuclear reactors. I went to the Naval Academy and then took the secure and safe route. And I was in the Navy, and then in about 92, peace broke out. You know, the Russians stopped being the enemy, and so that industry started to pull back. So I looked at that as an opportunity. Well, you know, I could go into the corporate world. And so I went with a Fortune 500 company and went through engineering and then operations, sales, and marketing, and really looked at that as, okay, here's another, secure industry. And we built it up. We actually had our own distributorship selling here in Michigan. In 2008, when the economy turned, the manufacturers all wanted to buy back the distributorships. They wanted to cut out the middleman, which always sounds great until you look in the mirror and you realize I'm the middleman. So once again, this, secure career path that was going to go on forever changed because of things beyond my control. And one of the things we had was a small sideline business, and we helped patients that couldn't bear weight and couldn't bear crutches. And what motivated me about it so much was that most of the products that we rented, most of them were rentals, would come back with thank you notes. And we were just doing this in Michigan, but we realized we've got a connection with these clients, and we're really doing good for them. They're appreciating what we do. How can we expand this out? And so being more bricks and mortar, the old school, we looked and said, hey, how could we do this with some of the tools that were coming out for e-commerce and internet? And this was in 2008, 2009. And we started to look at something called inbound marketing. And it's a theory that started by two smart guys out of MIT. And they basically said that the world is changing. Nobody wants to be sold anymore, but everybody wants to have help buying. And their thought is with the tools of the internet, that the people that would win would be those people that helped the most. So if people were on Google searching for an answer to their problem, that those people that had the answers, in a blog, in a podcast, in a video, they would gain the know, like, and trust. They'd gain the authority, and ultimately they would get the sale or help the person buy from them. So we did that, and we took our regional business from a local player here up to a national leader in 3 years with that strategy. And really, it's a strategy of how can you serve people. And I loved that. I loved the technology and the tools and the feedback we got for customers. And so I've still got that business as an owner, but over the last couple of years, I've helped other businesses use this same strategy to connect directly with their customers, to get more visitors, more leads, more customers. Because I think ultimately that's where your job security comes from, is who are you serving, not who is your employer.
Yes, your employer is your one and only client. If you diversify, just like with stocks, the more diversified you are, the less risk. But so many people have this thought that having one job is very secure. And as your story says, that's not the case. Things shift all the time. Industries change. Companies turn over. They switch management. They lay you off. And I believe that our job market is really radically changing. And eventually that one source of income is going to go away sooner rather than later. And people really need to learn how to network, how to add value, how to work with other people. And I think entrepreneurship skills I personally think it should be a life skill that everyone should have. But it's amazing how many people don't have them or know what to do or know where to begin.
And at times it can be just overwhelming. I totally agree with you on that. And I always look back on my military career, and I say that I've run a nuclear power plant and I've run a small business. And one of them was easy because it came with a manual. But for us now, there's so many tactics out there that you should use this trick. You should use, Facebook ads. You should be on Instagram. That so many of the tactics get out there that people get confused by it. And that's one of the things that I try to work with my clients on, is to figure out what the strategy is. Because if you know what your strategy is, you know who your customer is, you know how you want to help them, then you can take that and look at all these other little pieces and say, do they make sense for me? As opposed to just trying to piecemeal something together with lots of tactics.
I completely agree. I think there's so much information, it's distracting. And then a lot of it can contradict as well. So what you set out and one expert told you was the right way to do it, there's somebody else saying that's not the right way, this is the right way. And it is very tough to discern. So how do people come up with a strategy?
Well, I think the first one starts with, who do you want to serve? Who your ideal customer is. I always say the best advice and the worst advice I ever got came from my grandpa. When I was in college, he once told me, he said, choose carefully who you drink with, because you can't choose who you work with. And for him, that was true. That was his reality. He was a mechanic in a small town, and he had to take all customers. But Stephanie, today, we can be very choosy on who we want to work with. We've got access to probably not all 7 billion people, but pretty close. And of those 7 billion, we probably only need, 100, 1,000, maybe 10,000 to be successful. So we know who we can serve best, who we connect with. So we need to really focus on them. And I always tell people, if you're brick and mortar or online, whatever you're doing, the first step is really to define who's your ideal customer. Who can you thrill? Who thrills you to work with? Because once you start to define that person, it makes the decisions easier in your strategy. So, for example, if you know who you want to connect with. So say for me, I love working with coaches, authors, speakers, entrepreneurs. Then you start looking and saying, okay, where am I going to find these people? And what questions do they have? What problems do they have? How can I help them? What preconceived notions do they have that I can overcome? So once you start putting on that lens of who is my customer, how can I serve them, then the strategy becomes easier. One of the examples I always use is my daughter, when she was in junior high, middle school there, she came to me one day and she said, Dad, you need to be on Instagram. And I said, well, why? And she says, because everybody is on Instagram. Well, what she meant by everybody was her and all her friends.
Right.
At that point, none of my customers were on Instagram, so I had no business being on Instagram. In fact, looking back on it, it would have been creepy at that point if I was on Instagram. So
right.
If you first focus on who your ideal buyer persona is or your avatar, that's the core to any strategy. And the questions come from there is, how can I serve them? What do I need? How can I connect with them?
And I think, and that's extremely valuable, and we hear that a lot. And I think people get really tripped up with defining their ideal customer, or they don't realize that they have multiple personas and they're still trying to do too many things at once and they get very, very distracted. Or they define someone and then later there's just a lot of objections or problems they ran into that they didn't foresee. So have you ever had worked with someone who defined their ideal customer, but maybe, do you think there is such a thing that certain target audiences are not going to be viable and profitable? Or do you think that there's a strategy to work around some of the limitations they might run into?
I think you can make any market viable and profitable. The question is, can you serve them well, and do you get energized by them? And sometimes that is just an ongoing process to see what customers you like to work with, which ones you don't. When you define that, your 2 or 3 personas that you're working with, that doesn't have to be it forever. So let me give you an example here. I've worked with nonprofits in the past. Great people. I love them dearly, but I tend now not to work with them. And it's not because of me or them. It's just we're not a good fit. I'm a person of action. I like people to work with people that want to take action. And nonprofits, by their nature, a lot of times are slower board meetings. And personally, for me, it became frustrating to do the same presentation 5 or 6 times to get a buy-in. And, that's probably why people charge more to those customers, because there's so much involved in it. So I looked at that and said, this is not one that thrills me. So, I'm going to focus more on the solopreneurs, the entrepreneurs, the people ready to take action. And there's a document I'll share, and we talked about this before. Anything we talk about here, if Stephanie and I reference it, I'll put it all together in a page so you can find out where it is. And if you just go to tmschwab.com/moved by purpose, there's a couple documents out there that I've used for years, and there's 2 questions on defining your ideal buyer. And one of them has to do with the demographics, and that's like the census information. So, what's their age, what's their education level, what's their income. That's the easy stuff. But then the psychographics are where it really comes in powerful. And those are the questions like, where do they get their information? Who do they trust? How do they make their buying decision? What preconceived notions do they have about me or my industry? So all of those things. And you put those 2 together and you've got a really good view of this hypothetical person that you're trying to sell to.
Yeah, that's very, very valuable. I think that helps a lot because there's, first of all, people that I think most of my audience is they have a business that's in startup, or they've had a business for a while and they're thinking about making a change or just learning new strategies, or they're wannabe entrepreneurs and they're still exploring what's involved with all this and where do I start. And when I first started, I had no background in business or marketing at all. As a social worker, we just didn't learn business at all. And I didn't study it in school either. So even when I was just starting off, when I would start reaching out and networking, and people would use language, or podcasters would start using language, and I'm like, I have no idea what this means. I would literally be like, what's inbound marketing? What's e-commerce? What is content marketing? What does all of that mean? And, I don't even know how to define an ideal customer. So I like how you have this document that will really help someone define that. I think it will really give them the confidence to get started if they're just thinking about it.
And Stephanie, I spent way too much money on an MBA in marketing. And after many years and many tens of thousands of dollars, I can boil down marketing to everybody in one sentence. Marketing is starting a conversation with somebody that could be a great customer. And if you just look at it from that aspect and then figure out who your customer is, the decisions become very clear with that.
It really is that simple. It really is. I mean, it's just like, how do you lose weight? Well, eat a little bit less, have portion control, and start working out more. I mean, it's not about having your grapefruit at 5 a.m. in the morning and then work, like how difficult and tedious we can get with all the technicalities of it, or tactics. It's just get out there, start talking, have a conversation, and be able to communicate the value that you have with the right people.
Right.
So,
and that's really something we've stumbled across over the last year. Inbound marketing as a term was always driven by content. And people would say, well, a content is a blog. You need to be blogging twice a week, or, you need to have videos up every couple weeks on YouTube. And we had one client that just had a great voice, had a great message, and he'd write a blog, and you know what? He'd spend 4 hours on the blog and it would read like every other blog. And we thought, there's got to be some way to get him in front of his ideal customer. And, podcasting is a great medium, but anybody that says it's easy to do has either never done a podcast or never done it well. Stephanie, my hat's off to you, because I know you put a lot of work into this art. So we looked at that and said, well, could we get him as a guest on podcasts, talking directly to his ideal customers? People that could hear his story, get to know, like, and trust him, and then come back to his website to be visitors, leads, and ultimately customers. So we did that, and we were amazed. A good blog will convert at 1% to 2%. So meaning for every 100 people that read the blog, 1 or 2 will become leads. What we saw with podcast interviews was that conversion rate was 25 times better. So 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 2 people that would come back to the site would become leads. And so we looked at that and said, is this just this individual, or is it the medium? I tested it myself. We tested it with other clients, and we proved that this system works. And we've been testing it and refining it over the last year. And I'm a strong proponent of getting on a podcast that your ideal customers are listening to. Telling your story, getting them to know, like, and trust you is the best way that you can grow any business here today in 2015.
I definitely have seen this strategy work and do completely agree with you. So for someone that it's like, okay, that's a good approach. There's still a learning curve involved. They might have questions like, where do I find these guests or podcasters? How do I can't necessarily listen to every podcast out there. Otherwise, I would be getting nothing done. How do I contact them? How do I get them to say yes to me? How do I say that I'm a good fit for their audience and I can add value to them? I'm sure those questions are running through their head because it sounds nice, but how do you do that?
Right. I wouldn't say there's a secret. There's a system to it. It's just like anything else. Once you figure it out, it's very easy and reproducible. I would say, once again, put yourself in the shoes of the podcast host, because they're your customer to get on there. And what are they looking for? They're looking for somebody that can share helpful content. They're looking for somebody that can engage their audience, somebody that can build a relationship with. And there's over 186,000 podcasts just in the U.S. right now. And you don't need to be on all of them. In fact, you don't want to be on most of them because they don't have your ideal customer. So a great place to start is just put yourself in your customer's perspective and say, what podcast do they listen to? You could even ask some of your current customers or clients, do you listen to podcasts? Which ones do you like? And that'll give you a sense of that. Even if you don't have that feedback, you could go to iTunes in the new and noteworthy section, and they've got it all broken down by categories. And these new and noteworthies are podcasts that have been around for less than 90 days. And so those are podcasts that, are up and coming and would be easier to get on from the very beginning. And then when you approach the host, and we've got some resources that can show you how to do this, you basically, be very direct and say, hey, this is what I can do to help your podcast. Here's the information I can share. And just being brief and to the point, and then attaching just like a one-page overview that gives your bio, your picture, all your contact information, 4 or 5 things that you can talk about, and all of those things. And with that, once you get on a few podcasts, it becomes very easy to get on other ones. Because one of the things that Stephanie and I will probably talk about when we stop the recording is, hey, do you need any other guests for your show? And I could recommend people to her that I know. And the same way I might ask, hey, do you know of any other shows that I might be good on? So with that, we're helping each other here, but also using this strategy of being a podcast guest. Once you get on a handful of podcasts, you can leverage that to get on more and more.
Yeah, I just started. It was actually when I had Aaron Walker, and I know that he was a client of yours or is a client of yours. When I had him on, I observed how he used the system or strategy. And I was like, that's really smart. I'm taking notes on that one. And I started doing the same thing. I'm like, hey, do you know anybody? Because before I would just interview the guest and then it was done. And I'm like, why am I not, asking for recommendations, or do they know that I could be a guest on, or vice versa, or that would love to be a guest on my show? I mean, the multiplication and how rapidly my network has grown. And it's really funny because you've mentioned names that I've recently interviewed in the last few months. And they've been introductions from Aaron, or then when I met the new person they introduced, then I ask for more, and it expands, and then you kind of have like this inner circle going on where you all know each other, which is it's pretty cool.
And think about it from
how that grows.
Going back to what's the definition of marketing, starting a conversation with somebody that could be an ideal customer. So not only are the guests probably an ideal customer, but the host would be an ideal customer, and you're trying to build relationships with this. And so when people say, well, where do I start? Well, start by figuring out 3 podcasts you could be on. You don't need to be on hundreds of podcasts. You just need to start by figuring out the 3 podcasts. And I can say from personal experience, I've been on a podcast as a guest, and there was probably over 50,000 downloads from that. And I got, I think, 5 leads out of it. I've been on another podcast where the host swears she gets 300 downloads per episode, and I got 150 leads out of that. Why? Because those were the exact customers that I wanted to talk to. They were my exact ideal customers there. So, you don't have to hit it out of the park every time. You can build your business just by hitting singles.
I totally agree. And I was featured on Entrepreneur on Fire, and this is leading to my next question. Now, and that was a great opportunity. I got a lot of leads. A lot of valuable things happened. John Lee Dumas is incredible. Oh my goodness, he's a tough interviewer too. He does not let you sweep anything under the rug. But I really wish I would have known certain strategies on how to be an ideal podcast guest. In addition to adding value, which I completely believe I did, there is kind of a strategy with I see other people that have, you have a valuable document that you make available for the listeners to go and get, and that's added into the conversation. And I mean, it's like, okay, I want that. And it leads people to go want that. How do you know, like, what are some tips on what to keep in mind when you are a guest to really make the most valuable for everyone involved?
Sure, and I'll give you complete behind the curtain here in transparency. If you listen to this interview and listen to other ones, this is how the system works, right? So step 1 is defining who you want to talk to. Step 2 is defining what your expertise is, what you're going to talk about. Step 3 is identifying the podcast and pitching yourself to the host. Step 4 is getting on and having a perfect interview. And that's making the host look like a genius for having you there, talking about different stories, different things about your business, but always on how it could help your audience. And while you're doing this, you're continually talking about other resources that they could find. I love podcasts because it's a great medium that, we can walk around and listen to, but there's a lot of things that we can't see. So if you want, the document on how to get your ideal buyer persona, if you want the infographic that goes through these 6 steps, well, you're going to have to come back to the website to get those. And we've got one customer, and she makes these quilts. And I love this example because, the quilts where she'll cut up, jerseys or T-shirts and make a quilt out of it. Well, if she's on a sports podcast, she can go, well, we made one for Wayne Gretzky. And, if you want to see his, just go to the website, and she'll give them the address. And you don't think that every guy wants to see what Wayne Gretzky's quilt looks like? Or she'll be on a podcast for moms, and she'll talk about how they took baby clothes and cut them up and made a quilt, and, then drives people back there. So the only way they can see it is to go back there. And you don't want to just send them to your homepage. If you go to tmschwab.com, the day that this airs, you might see the same stuff. But this podcast, you could be listening to it in, 2018. You want to make sure that people come and get what they expect. So that's why we always, put that extra welcome page. So it's tmschwab.com/moved by purpose. And anything you talk about there, you just put in there. So, there's the questions on the demographics and the psychographics of how to define your customer. There's the infographic on the 6 steps to growing your business as a podcast guest. There's a 30-minute webinar training there. So you're giving all these things. So when people go from being a listener, then they come to your site as a visitor. They come to that, welcome page, and then you give them opportunities to download different things. And some of them you just put out there. Other ones you might want to put behind a form, like to get the 30-minute training on how to grow your business as a podcast guest. Well, you've got to trade your email address for that. And so that really makes someone a lead and starts that conversation. And it also helps us because, one of the things we ask is, what do you do? Are you a coach? Are you an author? Are you a speaker? Are you a small business? And so that way we can let you self-segment yourself so that the information we give you is specific to you. And so that's the entire behind the scenes, behind the curtain on how the process works. And you can use the same 6 steps in your business to grow it.
Oh, love it. Love it, love it. Tom, thank you so much for being that transparent and sharing that system. Of course, I'm sure people have even more questions and want to know even more, which again will drive them to connect with you. So how can, and I know you mentioned this special page. What is that URL again? I'll make sure to have that in the show notes so people can go. But for those that are listening, how can they connect with you?
Sure. It's just tmschwab, spelled schwab.com/moved by purpose. And I'm also on LinkedIn. I love that platform. I always say that I'm the only Tom Schwab in Kalamazoo there. So please connect with me. I'm also on Twitter at tmschwab.
Awesome. LinkedIn. I know I use LinkedIn and Twitter are my platforms that I'm on most frequently. Well, thank you again. This was extremely valuable. You gave tons of very actionable, easy to implement steps and provided us with the resources on how to not only just listen but to actually take action and do something with it. So I love that. Love having guests that not only just shoot out ideals but also provide resources relevant to what they're saying. So,
and Stephanie, the last thing I would say is that, podcasts are growing. It's more on-demand radio now than podcasts. And there's one thing that's certain, is that your clients, your customers are going to be listening to podcasts. The only question is, are they going to hear you or somebody else? And this is a great system that anyone can use to make sure that you're marketing, you're starting that discussion with your ideal customer.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Thank you again, Tom. And I definitely recommend that you go check that link out. Get that. I'm going to get it because I think that's extremely valuable. And I thank you for making that available to all of us.
Thank you, Stephanie. I can boil down marketing to everybody in one sentence. Marketing is starting a conversation with somebody that could be a great customer. And if you just look at it from that aspect and then figure out who your customer is, the decisions become very clear with that.
There you have it. That was Tom Schwab. Everyone make sure to check him out. All of his website and how to connect with him is in the show notes. Make sure that you grab that free giveaway that he is making available to you and say hi. Let him know you appreciate him sharing his expertise and being as transparent. And if any of you have been wondering how effective podcasting is or how to get on the show on podcast, reach out to him. He is your man and he will get you going. And this is the week where it is Cyber Week. If there's any delays, because I have been running into a nightmare of technical glitches, and this seems to be a, if anything can go wrong, it will type of week with my podcast. So if this is late and doesn't get published, then I'm sorry. I will extend the discount for you, because that's how much I love you. And just let me know that you listen to it, of course, on the day that it's published, not like 5 weeks later and think that you can get the discount. So this is a time-sensitive offer, but if this offer is getting published late, I will honor this discount. I'll even be even more generous for the month of December. For the entire month of December. So you heard about this discount. You have to know about the discount in my weekly newsletter. This offer is only available for those on my newsletter. I can announce it, but you have to be part of my email list. And that is getting 50% off all coaching plus $900 of free coaching in addition to the 50% off. This is a deal you will not see anywhere else, and it is only available for Cyber Week. But because this might be getting late, I said I will extend it for the month of December, but you have to be in my email list. If you are not, then you will be missing out on this incredible opportunity to give as a gift or to finish your year strong or to ensure that all the goals you set for next year are actually going to be met. And if you have no clue what your goals are or what you even want, that's why you hire a coach. Coaches help you set goals if you don't know what it is that you want. They help you meet your goals if you're clear on what you want but are stuck on how to get there and where to start. And then, if you are clear on how to start and how to get there, but need accountability and strategy, coaches do that too. So, whatever space that you are in, you need a coach. And this opportunity for 50% off, I'm practically giving it away for free. So, don't miss out. And I'll talk to all of you next week. Love you.